Okay, so good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's public lecture under prestigious Lien Chow Professorship in Education, organized by the Psychology and Child and Human Development Department at the National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technological University. This public lecture is one of the main events of our project Genie, which is funded by the Lien Foundation. My name is Riwani, and I am honored to be your MC for this evening. As its title suggests, the Lien Chow Professorship in Education public lecture aims to bring leading experts to contribute to the advancement of Singapore's education system. This initiative focuses on developing educational programs and research that address the diverse needs of all students, particularly students with special educational needs and disabilities, to ensure a more inclusive future. Let us watch this video to learn more about Dr. Lien Chow's passion and contribution to education.
Dr. Lien Chow's legacy through the Lien Foundation helps us rethink philanthropy.
Oh, no, that is not.
The focus on education to uplift every learner.
He was instrumental in the setting up of Nanyang University.
We are really grateful for having given our students all these opportunities.
Dr. Lien Chow didn't just believe in community, he lived it. And when it came to education, his motto was simple: no one left out, no one left behind.
Dr. Lien Chow was a very prominent businessman and is best known for founding the Overseas Union Bank. He was born in Guangdong, China, and at the age of 14, he immigrated to Singapore with very little. He did not have any formal education, and perhaps it was because of that he developed this lifelong focus that education is something that is important for all.
I think there are many ways in which the Lien Foundation has impacted PCHD. There's a very generous donor who's actually supporting us in what we do, especially in the field of early childhood and special education. So I think we are really grateful to the foundation for that.
Imagine a future where every child's potential is unlocked through inclusive education. This is Project Genie, a bold initiative transforming teaching, learning, and leadership for all. Cue the Lien Chow Professorship, a hub for brilliant thinkers, bold ideas, and a shared mission to make education inclusive for all.
The professorship benefits NIE faculty and students by bringing international scholars to NIE. The scholars will engage our faculty and students through seminars, talks, as well as collaborative research. All these events help to advance knowledge, learn more about cutting-edge research, as well as gain global perspectives.
Inclusion Matters is where leaders, teachers, principals, psychologists, and more come together to crack the code on making every classroom a place where everyone truly belongs. And the Impact Grant helps bring ideas to life, creating real change in the community.
Dr. Lien Chow's legacy through the Lien Foundation helps us to rethink philanthropy because he believed in the power of education to transform lives and to uplift communities. He was known to say, "I must do more, leave something so that people will know that I have tried to do good here."
Okay, thank you, Sir Riwani. Good evening, friends, colleagues, fellow educators. Thank you for coming to this public lecture to be presented by a very eminent and distinguished professor, right? So thank you, and we are very glad that Professor Meghan Burke is here with us today. So I told Meghan this, right, over the last few days, right, we had a lot of conversation. So I told her that when I first sent the invitation email to her, right, to invite her to be the Lien Chow professor, my team and I were all praying very hard that she will say yes. And then when she finally said yes, actually she said yes very quickly, and we were all like cheering, yay, she's coming, right? Okay, Yeah. So, through our conversation, we also discovered that we have many things in common. We talk about our families, we talk about our belief, our values, and our idea for supporting children and individuals with special needs, right? And we believe in the power of advocacy, right? And the power that all of us can do to make this, our community, a more inclusive community. Yeah, okay. So let me do the formal introduction for Professor Meghan Burke. Professor Meghan Burke is a professor of special education at Vanderbilt University Peabody College. Her research focused on advocacy, disability policy, and the essential roles family play in supporting individuals with disability. She is widely recognized for her work on how families navigate service system and how siblings transition into caregiving roles, right? Professor Burke has developed several impactful advocacy programs, including the Vanderbilt Kennedy Center Volunteer Advocacy Project. This project, right, is a very impactful project that equips family with the knowledge and skills to navigate disability services, right? Professor Burke has authored many publications, many articles, right? Many important and influential texts in the field, right? And she also served as an associate editor of many academic journals, right? And contributing significantly to research and practice and policy in disability and education, right? So I think I should stop here, right? Otherwise, I will need my team to bring me loads of coffee because I'll be standing here all night talking about her achievement and her awards and her contribution to the community, to the education sector, right? So let's put our hands together to welcome Professor Meghan Burke to present to us, right, on the topic of developing strong family-school partnership for children with disability. Professor Meghan Burke, please.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel so honored to be here, and I was thrilled when I got the email inviting me to come. I think I might have said yes before I asked my husband if he would stay back. Very honored to be here as the third Lien Ying Chow professor. Very happy to meet everyone here. It's been such a nice trip and really the opportunity of a lifetime. So I'm talking today about developing strong family-school partnerships among families of children with disabilities. As a brief overview, I'm going to start by underscoring the importance of family-school partnerships. And then I want to spend the bulk of the time, though, talking about research-based strategies to improve partnerships, and then conclude with some new initiatives or resources that we have that seem to be really effective in promoting these partnerships. So in terms of the importance of partnerships, we know that when families and educators partner, there are improved outcomes for students with disabilities. This means they do better in school, but also they do better post-school. They're more likely to be employed, they're more likely to be living in the community, they're more likely to be attending college. We also know that the benefits extend beyond the child to include the family. So families of children with disabilities report that when they partner with the school, they have improved family quality of life. Further, family-school partnerships are such a great variable because it's malleable. We can fix it, we can improve it through targeted interventions, and it matters no matter what your demographic background. So when you improve family-school partnerships, regardless of the race or ethnicity of the family, regardless of their socioeconomic background or parent educational background, we know that there are better outcomes. So this is a graph from a study that we did with about 965 moms of kids with disabilities, and we looked at the relation between maternal stress and the quality of the family-school partnership. On the y-axis, you'll see the parenting stress index. On the x-axis, you'll see two subscales of our family professional partnership scale. And what you'll see is the fourth quartile means the highest. That's the excellent partnerships. Now, in the parenting stress index, 90 is the clinical cutoff. If you're scoring above 90, it means that you have clinically high levels of stress. And when you look here, our two subscales, if you're in the fourth quartile, means you have the best partnerships. And only when you have the best family school partnerships are you able to lower maternal stress below a clinical level. This is so important because we know moms of kids with disabilities compared to the general population experience significantly higher stress. This demonstrates that through family school partnerships, we can actually lower that. Now, maybe you're not into graphs, so I thought it might be more helpful or resonate to hear directly from some families. The video you're gonna see is a family of a young child with global developmental disabilities. It's a very rural young mom, and she's gonna talk about the importance of partnering with educators and therapists in early intervention. Her daughter is between the ages of 0 to 3, so she's getting younger kids services. But I think it'll resonate with you to understand how important these partnerships matter. So now we've seen a couple of different pieces of evidence that really underscores the importance of partnerships when they work well. But let's flip it and say, well, what happens if they're not going so well? And so for this, I want to illustrate it with a personal story. I'm the oldest of 5 children. Number 4 in line is my brother, Ryan. He's now 31 years old. He loves musical theater. He works 2 jobs, 5 days a week. He lives at home with my parents. And he is the godfather to his 5 nieces and nephews. He loves the title of being godfather. I know you were just kind of like, oh, that's so nice. He does not like young children. So for his 30th birthday, he wanted all of us to go to Las Vegas, the gambling mecca, not because he likes to gamble, but I think because it's such a child-unfriendly place that it would ensure that we would not bring our young children. And because Ryan is the centerpiece of our family, 18 of us left our young children at home and went to Vegas to celebrate his 30th birthday. He has all of us on speed dial. He can dial it in. As you can also tell from the picture, Ryan has Down syndrome. So I want to take you back in time for when Ryan was 3 years old. He was exiting early intervention and going into the school system. My parents wanted him in an inclusive preschool classroom. The school district wanted him in a self-contained classroom only for students with disabilities. They couldn't come to an agreement, so my parents filed due process against the school. The school district had an attorney. My dad is an attorney, albeit not a special education attorney, so he had to learn special ed law to argue Ryan's case. We prevailed at the hearing. The losing party has 120 days to appeal. The school district appealed on the 119th day. It went to the next level of court where we prevailed. 119 days later, they appealed. It went to our 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, which was our level right before the Supreme Court, at where we prevailed and they stopped appealing. And so there's been several kind of newspaper articles about it at the time, talking about the importance of inclusion. What does the case mean, not only for Ryan, but in terms of setting a precedent to say that inclusive education really matters, especially for young children. So they're interviewing my dad in this article, and I just think it's interesting now, looking back. His final quote at the end says, "It seems that all the progress he makes and keeps is from wanting to be the same or similar to his siblings, relatives, and kids without disabilities. All school districts should be offering this. It's a right that parents should be able to get." Now, if you ask a family what happened after they filed due process, families will often say they put a for sale sign in their front yard. Because at that point, even if you have prevailed, your partnership with the school district is so fragmented, it's unsalvageable. And we were no exception to that. We also moved. And so you may be wondering, well, what were the barriers? Why did this happen? What could you have done differently? Why are partnerships so hard to come to fruition? And we could spend the next hour just talking about barriers. Yeah, but we're not going to. We're going to focus on solutions. But to summarize, I like to show this comic strip. It has a series of educators on one side of the table and a parent and an advocate on the other side. An educator says, "I'm not sure why Mr. Barth always feels compelled to bring an advocate to the IEP meeting." And at the bottom it says, "outnumbered?" Regardless of whether or not it's intentional, it can feel very disempowering for a parent to be on one side of the table and a series of professionals on the other side. It can feel very hard for a parent to speak up and to advocate. it can be very difficult to overcome all these barriers and have this mutually beneficial partnership. And so hopefully now we can shift and talk about some of the research-based strategies we've developed to really address that partnership and to improve it. So to guide us, I have the Sunshine Framework, which is in the upper right-hand corner of the slide. The Sunshine Framework is a framework that we've developed for children with and without disabilities, so it should work in general and special education. What differentiates the framework from other parent involvement frameworks is that it really characterizes the partnership as mutually beneficial and bidirectional. So for partnerships to work, the family has to give and the educator has to give. And for partnerships to work, the family has to derive a benefit and the educator has to derive a benefit. It has to go both ways. Now, within the Sunshine Framework, we've identified 6 dimensions of partnerships that are really critical to making this partnership happen. Communication, advocacy, commitment, trust, equity, and respect. So we'll kind of dive deeper into each of these dimensions. The first being communication. So communication is just bidirectional messages between the family and the school. They can take any modality: email, day-to-day written notes, phone calls, text messages, in-person meetings. But regardless of the modality that's chosen, it should be frequent, it should be open, truthful, and responsive. The other caveat to that is that it should be strengths-based for the majority of the time. A lot of families of kids with challenging behavior have frequent, open, truthful communication with their educator, but it's often negative. And that would not promote strong family-school partnerships. I'm not saying you don't include the negative things, but it is important to make sure that the proportion of positive to negative is outweighed and leans more towards the positive. So one of the strategies that we use in terms of communication is a mindfulness-based strategy. And so I have several of them listed here, but the one that I thought we'd try to enact as we get into this is just counting back from 10 to 0. So I'll just give you a second, and I'll count in my head, 10 to 0, just so we're all kind of in the same place and able to kind of center ourselves and focus. Whenever I do this, I feel like you can tell I was once a special ed teacher, because I'm very comfortable with time delay and just waiting people out, right? Okay. So one of our strategies for in-person meetings is called the SOLAR strategy. It's an acronym. We'll go into each of these. The first being sitting facing the family. So you saw this in the comic strip and you see it up here as well. If you're sitting and you have educators on one side and the family on the other, it's really set up like you're at odds with one another, right? That's not what we're going for. Ideally, what it would look like is sitting around a round table, we're able to kind of talk to one another and you don't have sides. Another one is open. So considering your posture. If you come to a meeting and your arms are folded, it generally means that you're not willing to accept feedback, that you're not willing to listen. Now on the other side, you see this woman has her hand up. She's more open to feedback. Leaning forward. So in this one on the left, yeah, your left, you see that the man is kind of slouched over, doesn't really seem to be paying attention. Whereas on the right, we see the woman is leaning in, which indicates to someone that they're very interested in hearing what you have to say. Eye contact is for the E. So if you're not looking at someone, if you're looking over there at the ceiling, that generally could indicate that you're not listening. Whereas if you are looking at the person and engaging in some joint attention, that can signal to somebody that you're open and responding to their communication. And finally, R. So being relaxed, being natural can help alleviate any kind of like formality that goes with the meetings. So this woman on the left looks very angry. Hopefully that's not relaxing. Whereas the person on the right seems very open and kind of friendly and engaging. Now, these strategies are really for in-person communication, but we do know in special education there's a lot of written communication. And so switching into that, one of the forms of written communication that we see often are like evaluation reports, progress reports, daily report cards, right? So if we look at this report, this is a real report for a young child. It's written by a physical therapist. I've blocked out the child's name, but this is a real report that the PT sent. This is just one paragraph out of the 5 pages of the report. And I won't read the whole thing because it's long, but I'll read a few of it. In the beginning, it says, the child presents with hypotonia throughout his trunk and extremities. The child was noted to have excessive passive range of motion through bilateral upper extremities and is hypermobile through his shoulder girdle. In sitting, the child presents with a rounded trunk, posterior pelvic tilt, and both lower extremities externally rotated. And it goes on and on, kind of in that same vein. So I went through, this is a report that the physical therapist was giving to the family to explain to the family the gross motor, fine motor functioning of the child. So the purpose of the report is to educate the family on what's going on with the child. Now, I don't think I'm the smartest person in the room, but I do have a PhD in special education, right? So I'm a little different than other families, but still, when I went through and highlighted all the words I don't know, there are a lot of jargon in here. And if I don't know them, then I would guess to say that most families don't know all of these technical terms that are in the report, which means they can't access it, which means you're not supporting partnerships. I think it's great that this physical therapist knows the jargon. She clearly knows what she's talking about, but it doesn't help when she's trying to educate someone who doesn't know the jargon, right? She needs to break it down. Now, if we take this one step further, we'd look at maybe the things that she's saying the child can't do. Because in a lot of evaluation reports, they tend to be deficit-based. They tend to be negative, where the child is lagging behind their peers, right? And that makes sense because that's usually how you qualify for services and how you write goals. But from a family perspective, everything highlighted in blue are negative things that the child can't do. So overall, you'll see actually the majority of this paragraph is either inaccessible in terms of jargon, and or negative in terms of focused on what the child can't do, right? And that makes it something that parents generally don't want to read. And that doesn't help your partnership because then you as the educator are frustrated that parents are not reading your reports, and then it just, spirals from there. Now, if we flip this, this is a different progress report. This is written by a developmental therapist to a family. She's writing a progress note on what happened with the child at their therapy. And so she wrote, we had a great session today. We worked on moving from laying on his back to sitting. He did best when rolled to his right side. The first several times he did help push himself up, but as our session went on, he provided less and less help. We did take breaks between times. He is a bit of a stinker, and when I was signing and saying help to get him to help me, when moving him from laying to sitting, he also signed help and then just laughed. Paints a clear picture on what's going on, right? We also worked on supported walking. He walked across the short part of his classroom with me holding onto his fingers and providing support, but not so much that he was not working. We also worked on having him do a 4-point crawl when crawling from one area to another. He needed a lot of support to keep his body up and not do his typical army crawl. He did well imitating most animal sounds when reading brown bear, but he just laughed or smiled when I tried to get him to imitate moo. He did say mama later in the session, so he can make the M sound. So if we break this down, she's starting with a positive. And I would say objectively, that's just a good thing to start with. Even as somebody who teaches undergraduates, I always start with a positive. Even if the student starts with a sentence that's wrong, my positive is usually something like, thanks for writing your name on this paper. I'm so glad. It helps me identify it's you. I always start with a positive, right? Helps start us off. She calls him a stinker. You all kind of chuckled when we got to this part. It shows that she knows him. It's informal. It shows that she understands his personality, and she's treating him more as a person, right, than just a name on a piece of paper or a client or somebody she's serving. She has high expectations. She's really clear, like, I'm not giving him a lot of support, or I am giving him a lot of support, so we got to wean him off of that. She's being very clear that she wants to make sure he's working during the session. But she's also truthful. So like I said, our children do have challenges. Communication is not about concealing those challenges. You have to be truthful about where the child is at. But she ends on a positive note. And by and large, she has more positive statements in here than she does have negative. So I had given this a version of this presentation a few years ago, and the therapist who happened to write that progress note was in the audience. And so I was really glad I was saying nice things. And she said, you know, I want to comment on that, on the progress note you shared. And I said, great. And this is what she said: that's what I do for all my families. If you can't be there for the sessions, I want you to feel like you were there. And I thought that was so great that that's the purpose of these progress notes for her. So just a general rule of thumb before we move on from communication is really thinking about that proportion of positive to negative statements. My general rule of thumb is 3 positive to every 1 negative statement to make sure that you have both in there, but one is outweighing the other. So moving on to advocacy. As Professor Ming mentioned, my main line of research is advocacy. I tend to be a bit of a geek about advocacy, so we're going to spend a little bit more time on advocacy than we do on the other dimensions, just because I like it the best. But they're all important, okay? So what is advocacy? It's educating families about their rights. It's empowering them to speak up at meetings. It's helping them to address and de-escalate conflict. Now, as was also mentioned, I've developed several advocacy interventions, teaching families how to advocate for their children with disabilities across the lifespan, which really means from early intervention all the way through adult disability services. The one in the center is the Volunteer Advocacy Project. This is a 36-hour advocacy training program. It's offered in a cohort format, so you learn in a group setting with other people. It focuses on instrumental and affective knowledge. So instrumental meaning we teach you about the law, what you're entitled to, what the regulations say. Affective meaning we focus on relieving stress, doing non-adversarial advocacy versus aggressive advocacy, and supporting families. The purpose of the VAP is to train people to become special education advocates so that when they graduate from the VAP, they advocate for free for 4 other families of kids with disabilities. So it's a pay-it-forward, kind of train-the-trainer model. I will say, that being said, 60%, 60, of all the people who go through the VAP are parents of children with disabilities. So they're going through it not only to help other families, but also to help their own child. Now, we have several different versions of these. I'll just go through so you can see the different iterations. The VAP is for anyone, but tends to attract primarily parents. But we do have some interventions that focus on siblings, mainly adult siblings of individuals with disabilities, really focusing on teaching them advocacy skills, as siblings are often next in line to be caregivers for their brothers and sisters with disabilities. Then we also have interventions focused on child services, but we also have advocacy interventions focused on adult disability services. School services are hard to navigate. In the States, adult disability services, 10 times harder to navigate. They're much more difficult, they're siloed, they're fragmented, there are different laws governing them, and so we spend a lot of time teaching families how do you navigate different systems. And then this slide, we really think about advocacy as 3 tiers. Individual advocacy is parents advocating for their own children with disabilities. Peer advocacy is like the VAP, so people are advocating for other families of kids with disabilities. And systemic advocacy, so people are learning how to advocate for systems change for everyone. They tend to be learning about legislative advocacy, social media campaigns, ways to educate the public about disability issues. And why we do this? We do this because equity is at the forefront of everything. If we only had one parent advocacy training, teaching parents how to advocate for their own kids, we'd be elevating one group of people who were able to attend that and respond to it while leaving everyone else behind. And that's not the purpose. The purpose is to bring everyone together so they're able to advocate for their children. Families are often in different spots, right? Some families know how to advocate. They're very empowered. They don't need any training. Some families need the VAP, and they're able to advocate for their own child and other families. Some families need individualized hand-holding to help them navigate through the process. That being said, there is one highlighted in green, and those are navigators. That aligns most with peer advocacy. We call them navigators because unlike our advocacy models, we pay them to navigate for families. So it's a little bit more of a professional role. Now, you're probably worried that I'm going to go over each and every one of these. I would love to, but we don't have time. So we're only going to go over one that I think is most maybe relevant, and that's our Latino Parent Leadership Support Project, or LPLSP. So this is something we developed in tandem with Dr. Sandy Meghan, who's an international expert in thinking about autism among Latino families. It's also a 36-hour training. It's done in a cohort model. We did it in person. It's offered entirely in Spanish. So it's entirely for Latino Spanish-speaking families of kids with autism and other types of disabilities. It's focused on navigating special education services, so it's limited to school-age children. The people who facilitate it were two Latina moms of young adults with autism. They work at a parent training center, which I'll go over towards the end. But it's important for you to know that all of our research is done in partnership with community-based organizations. So they are with us from the beginning to the end, and they give us information about how to design the intervention so that it's scalable and replicable, because our idea is after we conduct the research, they can then use it in their organization long after the grant ends. So they facilitated the intervention. In terms of content, we focus on teaching parents about their special education rights. We focus on empowering them to speak up at meetings. We focus on how to communicate with the school and what are the available services that their child can get. This is not a didactic training. There is very little didactic instruction in this training. We do a lot of games, a lot of bingo games with special education terminology. We do a lot of role playing. You play the parent, you play the educator, and act out what a meeting would look like and how you respond to certain things. And we do a lot of small group activities. So we ran a quasi-randomized control trial. So we compared the intervention group to a waitlist control group to see whether or not the LPLSP improved outcomes. What's important to know about that is that between the two groups that are listed in the two columns at the top, the intervention and the control group, there were no significant demographic differences. So they're pretty identical groups. But what's more important for you to know is that across the entire sample, it's primarily moms. Most of our research with advocacy tends to be with moms. They tend to be the ones who are advocating. What I think you should also know is that we're talking about a sample that has very little, on the whole, formal education. So they're still going through this 36-hour intensive program, but most of them are high school graduates or less. So we're not talking about a very well formally educated sample. And we're also talking about a pretty low-resourced financially sample. So most people made less than $30,000 a year on average who went through the training. Now, we looked comparatively to the waitlist control group, and thankfully we saw significant differences between our intervention and our control group. So I've highlighted them here. So in our intervention group, we saw significant increases after taking the training in terms of their special education knowledge. We saw greater empowerment among the families. We saw better family-school partnerships, which signals to us that we were able to teach them how to advocate in a non-adversarial way, because if we had taught them how to advocate aggressively, that score should go down, right? And most exciting is that we saw the number of services that the child was receiving significantly increase. Because that's what this is really all about. We're supporting the family, which is kind of the mechanism of change that all these things are happening. But where the rubber hits the road are the child outcomes improving? And is the child getting more services? And based on this, yes. So at the end of class, we had them write on Post-it notes what they were taking away from the training. I'm not sure if anybody in here speaks Spanish. No, okay, fair enough. Okay. So I'll translate some of these. But so one mom wrote, I learned that people have to evaluate my child to receive appropriate services, and they have to ask for my written consent. This mom actually came into training session one day. She came in a little early, and she's like, listen, in Spanish. She's like, listen to this. I got this voicemail from my son's teacher. And so we listened to the voicemail, and the voicemail is also in Spanish. So she has a special education teacher who's bilingual in English and Spanish. There's not a language barrier here. And the special education teacher in the voicemail says to her, I just need you to come in and sign this form for an evaluation. No meeting, I just need you to sign this form. Just come in and sign the form at the office. I don't need to meet with you, just sign the form. And the mom says, if I hadn't been in this training, I would have gone in and just signed the form and not known what I was signing. But because I'm in this training, I understand there's supposed to be a meeting. We're supposed to go over the different domains my child should be evaluated in. I'm supposed to give my feedback, and then I give consent for the evaluation process to start. Another person wrote, I learned about the rights that my child with a disability has, and so on and so forth. Now, the next video is one of the moms kind of talking through what she learned from the training.
Ya me emocioné. Y que clases como esta nos ayuda a entender y que tenemos apoyo que ni nos imaginamos. Sí, no estamos solos.
So I know it's a really short snippet, but I actually think it's very powerful for two reasons, right? One, she's very emotional, right? And I think sometimes we don't talk about that enough, but the entire process of partnering with educators is very emotional for families. The meetings are very emotional for families. And so she's alluding to how hard this can be. And then the second part is she's talking about the support that she got from other families being in the training. And so being with other people who have the same shared experience of raising a child with a disability can be really impactful. Okay, so you may be wondering, well, what about parents who can't go through that training? You know, that's great that you had some parents who didn't have kind of the typical resources who attended the training, but there are a lot of parents who can't go through a 36-hour training. What about them? Good point. So this project was just like the VAP. It was a pay-it-forward model. So we said when they signed up, we're going to give you this 36-hour training. Our hope is that you'll advocate for free for 4 other families of kids with disabilities. 3 months after taking the training, we surveyed them and said, have you advocated for other families? On total, the intervention group had advocated for 91 other families for free. On average, 3 families. It ranged from 0 to 15, which means some families didn't advocate for anyone, but some families advocated for free for 15 other families. Then we asked, well, what type of advocacy were you doing? Oftentimes they were doing referrals, they were explaining somebody's rights, and then we looked at the differences between family-focused advocacy and school-focused advocacy and saw they were doing more family-focused activities. Family-focused means meeting with families in their kitchens, talking to them, going over maybe their educational documents and walking them through the process. They were more likely to engage in those activities versus actually going to the school and going to a meeting with a family. We were pretty proud of this. But it just underscores this idea of systemic advocacy and building everyone up versus only giving a select few who can attend a training like this and letting them access services and partner with schools. So moving on to commitment. Commitment is defined as being committed to a family. If you have a shared experience, because we know it matters, if you have a family member with a disability, sharing that, leveraging that experience, because that shared experience is so important. But if you don't have that, you can still be committed. And committed really means doing what you say you're going to do. Showing up when you say you're going to show up. So I don't know if you've seen this before. This was like a very popular kind of poem that ran around in the disability community. And it's entitled, A Special Needs Parent Fell in a Hole. And a family member says, what hole? A boss says, oh, that's a shame, you can have the day off. A doctor says, can you keep a diary of your experiences in the hole? Right? These are resonating, right? Yeah. A Department of Disability Services says, we will assess the size of the hole, however, it may take up to 18 months. Local authority, sorry, we don't have money for a ladder. Charity, here's a form, fill it out, and you can get on the waiting list for a ladder. But what we have down here is another special needs parent saying, I'm here, I'm coming down with you. I've been here before, I know how to get out, and I won't let you do it alone. This is so common in our disability community. It is so common that families help one another. And so really, in the advocacy interventions that I've just talked about, we're leveraging this interest and bringing everyone into the fold versus leaving some people behind. If you don't have that shared experience, I think it's very important to know that commitment does not mean going above and beyond. I'm assuming if you're an educator and you're here at 6:30 at night to learn about family school partnerships, you're probably pretty committed, right? I think you're probably doing a pretty good job. But you don't have to overexert yourself to exhibit this dimension. So I like to show this graph. This is showing the relationship between child problem behavior and parenting stress. which if you're a parent, regardless of whether or not you have a child with a disability, you probably know that when your child has a meltdown or a tantrum, you are more stressed, right? But my colleague Cami Neese did a study looking longitudinally at maternal stress and child problem behaviors. And what she found is there is actually a bidirectional relationship. So your child has problem behaviors, moms are stressed. Moms are stressed, kids have more problem behaviors. Kids have more problem behaviors, mom continues to get more stressed, and so on and so forth, right? And so what this shows us is overcommitting, trying to do more, actually does not help your child. It could hurt your child, right? It's one of the few times that we've been able to replicate a finding with dads. Same thing. Same thing happens with dads. And what you see at the bottom, this study was with families of 3 to 9-year-olds, but we see this across the lifespan, and we also see it with teachers, right? Teacher burnout. If you're doing too much, if you're overextending, at some point, you're not able to do your job and serve the kids that are in your classroom because you're so burnt out. So when I got here, I was reading one of the NIE reports, and I thought, oh gosh, this is just kismet. It aligns exactly with my slides. I don't even know these people, and I put them in my presentation. They could be here, and I have no idea. I hope somebody takes a picture and sends it to them if you know them. So anyway, I think it was your valedictorians. One of them said, Mr. Lee, teachers are the administrators, the social workers, the therapists, the second parents. It's not about the money. We do this because we heard the call, and we chose to answer. He must be a lovely person, this guy. And then she says, for all we teach others about bouncing back from failure, we must also be compassionate with ourselves. As teachers, we're a finite source and we cannot pour from an empty cup. This perfectly aligns with our definition of commitment, right? If you can't attend somebody's baseball game on a Saturday, don't say you can. Don't overexert yourself. But if you do say it, then you show up. I hope somebody in here knows them. Okay, good, okay. Another example of this. So this is my son, Rogan. Thank you. yeah. He's probably maybe 1.5, 2 in this picture. We adopted him at 2.5. At the time, he was labeled as having cerebral palsy. So at 2.5, he was about 16 pounds. He was not walking. He was not talking in any language. And so from the ages of 2.5 to 3 years, when we first had him in that 6-month period, we saw about 18 professionals just for evaluations, just to get an understanding of where he was at, to qualify for services, to understand medically what was going on. In addition to that, he got a lot of therapy. 3 times a week of speech therapy, 3 times a week of physical therapy. In fact, a funny side note, I wasn't able to go to the meeting with early intervention about physical therapy, so my husband went. And I said to my husband, they're gonna offer 1 time a week. I go, do not come home unless it's 2 times a week, physical therapy. And he was like, okay. And so he goes to the meeting, and they said to him, you know, Rogan's not walking, we have to work on that. He's really gross motor, a lot of delays. And then they go, we're gonna offer 1 time a week of physical therapy. And my husband, Chad, goes, or 2 times. And they were like, well, you know, on Tuesdays we can come once a week. He's like, and Thursdays. And finally, towards the end of the conversation, he was just like, I cannot go home unless you give 2 times a week of physical therapy. And then we paid privately for the 3rd. Occupational therapy 1 time a week, developmental therapy once a week, a nutritionist once a month, conductive ed, which is a really interesting hybrid of physical and occupational therapy that comes out of Hungary 3 times a week in the summer. So altogether, 27 professionals within the 6 months of life. We had a great, large team of people supporting Rogan. But I do think that we were all committed, but not overextended. It was hard. Don't get me wrong. It was very hard, and I don't want to undermine that. But I think it really shows that commitment can matter. So when we got Rogan home, and we were focusing on gross motor as one of his things, first we were focused on supported sitting, right? Gaining weight, right? Once we got through that and we got through crawling, we start focusing on weight bearing. You guys. Then we focus on walking in a walker. And like I said, it was all hard, and by the end, we were exhausted. Okay? But it all came to fruition one day in occupational therapy. Everybody loves that video. Yeah, we were so lucky to get it. And that's my husband and the occupational therapist in the room. And if you hear at the end, they both start cheering for him because we're all so excited, right? I think it shows like commitment, steadfastness matters, but overexertion would really be more harmful than good. Ugh, didn't need to show it again. Respect, fourth one. Treating children and families with dignity, being empathetic to people's feelings. You know, if you cry, I cry. I have a really good friend. She's a tremendous leader in the disability community. A lot of us go to her for feedback, for advice. She has 3 children, one with autism, one with Down syndrome, one with Down syndrome and autism. She's a busy lady, and she was at the point with the school where they could not come to an agreement. Her son was in the public school that he would attend if he did not have a disability. He was getting services there, but he wasn't making progress. And the mom was like, you know, we've tried inclusion, we've tried a lot of support, it's just not working right now. And I think he needs to go to a separate school for kids with autism. And the school district didn't agree. And they were just at a really tough standstill. And so she called me one day and she's like, you know, we have this meeting coming up. I'm really nervous. I'm really emotional about it. I don't know how this is going to go. I don't want to get a lawyer. And she goes, I'm really worried I'm going to cry at the meeting. And I go, you know, Kathy, what's the worst that can happen if you cry, right? Like, if you cry, you cry. It is what it is. So she went to the meeting. She called me afterwards. I go, how'd it go? She goes, well, I cried. Okay, that's okay, right? And I go, and what happened when you cried? And she goes, well, the special ed director started crying too. And I thought, that's great, right? Like, she's crying with you. You both have a difference of opinion on what's appropriate for the child, but you're able to have this like shared experience where you're meeting each other where they're at. This woman's clearly invested in your child just like you are. Like, what's the worst that could happen? And they actually did come to a resolution at the meeting. And I think it really lowered everybody's defenses by doing that. Restraining judgment, honoring the family's culture. So these are just a few examples of how to mitigate the power differential, which sometimes can manifest intentionally or unintentionally as disrespect. So introductions, a lot of times in our meetings, families are not referred to by their first name. They're referred to as mom or dad, which is interesting. And really, best practice would be to ask the mom or dad how they want to be addressed during a meeting, right? Very simple, but really changes the dynamic in terms of respect. Walking into the meeting. A lot of times in our meetings, the educators are all sitting at the table, and then you bring the family in, okay? And I was guilty of this too. I definitely did this as a special education teacher. All of us would be sitting at the table. I would leave the head of the table free so that I could escort the family in and they could sit at the head of the table. I thought I was doing something nice by letting them sit at the head of the table. But really what I should have done is said, we all enter in together, right? Because otherwise as the family, whether it's true or not, you feel like everyone was talking about you before you got in there. And it just doesn't, it's not a great way to start off a meeting. And then offering ways to document somebody's thoughts. Right? You're acknowledging that you hear them, you're acknowledging that you're listening. You know, instead of saying nobody talk, it can be helpful to put a Post-it note up and record somebody's notes or record them online where you can see in like a Google Doc. That can be really helpful in kind of showing your respect towards one another. With this, it's also important to pay attention to family concerns. So this was a family that I worked with. They were a foster family of a child with a disability. And they were at the meeting, and the teacher said, you know, what are your goals for Wyatt? And the dad said, we want Wyatt to say he loves us as his family and to give me a hug. Now, these are very genuine goals, right? Like, this makes a lot of sense if you're a family member. As an educator, though, you may be thinking, that doesn't fit in my curriculum. I have not heard that before. I don't know how to respond to that, right? But trying to acknowledge how a family's feeling, trying to understand where they're coming from, trying to ask probing questions instead of saying, we don't do that here, would be a much more respectful way to address it. So potential teacher responses, I'm so thrilled Wyatt has a loving family. I want to work with you to address your goals. Let's talk further about this for Wyatt. Or I'm so glad that Wyatt has a loving family. What are some ways we can partner to meet that goal, right? Instead of just saying, oh, we don't do that here. We don't teach people how to hug. equity. So in terms of equity, I think we often focus on barriers. What are the barriers? What is making one group able to get more than another group? And we could talk about that today. But instead, I'd rather focus on solutions and ways to leverage capital and the resources that families have. And so if you haven't read it, Dr. Yoso, who's a professor at University of California at Santa Barbara, came out this wonderful article about individuals of color and really flipping equity at a different angle and saying there is lots of capital among people of color and diving into these 6 different forms of capital. And we've since replicated this in the disability context, and it does seem to be very, very aligned. So we're gonna walk through each of these. So one is aspirational capital. Aspirational capital is just having goals, having expectations for the child with a disability. So as an example of this, I have a friend, her name is Christy. She has 4 children. Her oldest child is Allison. Allison has Down syndrome. Then she had 2 boys without disabilities, and then she had her youngest daughter, Josie. Now, I have never heard of this before, but after she had Josie, she did not get to see her right away. They kind of wheeled her away. And my friend Christy said to her husband, how does she look? And her husband goes, she looks like Allison. and she's like, oh, Josie also had Down syndrome. So she has 2 girls with Down syndrome. Now, the nice thing about this is the aspirational capital this gives them, right? Josie sees Allison graduate from high school. Josie sees Allison just last week, she moved into an apartment on her own. Right? It's aspirational capital. It's seeing what you want in your future. It's so powerful that she gets this mirror of what she can be in the future. And it's leveraging that as we work with families. Familial capital. This is leveraging either the immediate family network or the extended family network. This is a picture of Happy Joseph's journey. Joseph was one of my preschoolers. He's now 18, so that dates me quite a bit. And so Joseph, when he was one of my preschoolers, he has autism. He had his aunties and his grandma come and visit him, I would say like 2 or 3 times a week. They would come in at lunchtime, they would kind of come on field trips, and they were very clearly coming in to check on me and the aides, right? To make sure we were doing what was right, which is fine because we were. And so we nicknamed them Joseph's entourage. He had this group of really strong-minded women who were there to protect him. And that is such a huge asset. And now his mom has created a nonprofit called Happy Joseph's Journey that leverages all these different family members that are there to help Joseph. And as Joseph starts to transition into adulthood, she's going to use that network to help find employment, to figure out what he can do during the day, to build up his daily living skills. It is a tremendous strength that they have working towards them. And I think a lot of families have it as well. Linguistic and navigational capital. Linguistic capital, you guys have that in spades. Linguistic capital is the ability to speak 2 or more languages, right? Navigational capital is the ability to navigate different systems. So for the VAP, we've done several cultural adaptations of the VAP, one of which we did in Korean. There's an organization in New York that serves Korean American families of kids with disabilities. And so we shared the VAP with them and translated it and then culturally adapted it to fit their context. And of course, as researchers, we took a lot of data. And so at the end of it, we did a summative evaluation with a bunch of measures, including kind of open-ended questions. And in this one, we asked, is there anything else you'd like to say? And as a very rough translation, a mom wrote, thank you so much. Because of the VAP, my attitude toward life has changed after just 1 session. Please, please continue running the mentoring program, right? We're leveraging their linguistic capital. We have things available in Korean and in English. We're trying to make things available and accessible to them in different languages, and not just straight translation, because that wouldn't be culturally responsive, but tailoring it to the context they were in. But it's a strength, right? It's a strength and it's not a weakness. Social capital. So I've said this multiple times. Social capital is knowing other families of kids with disabilities. We know social capital matters in lots of different ways for our disability community. We've done several systemic advocacy interventions. These are 6-hour trainings. So they're much shorter than our other advocacy trainings. But at the end of our 6-hour training, we have parents complete videotaped testimonials where they say what they want changed in special education. We take their testimonials, we edit them, we translate them, we caption them, we send them back to the family with their legislators' contact information, and we have them send it to their legislators. Sometimes a lot of families feel very disempowered and uncomfortable going to their legislator's office, but they feel very comfortable emailing them, posting something on social media, tagging them in it to try to get their voice heard. And so we found this to be a lot easier to promote systemic advocacy. The mom that you'll hear from here has 2 boys, and she talks a lot about the importance of social capital and wishing she had it earlier. She's so powerful. Her network of moms has 400 moms in it already. Yeah. I have a doctoral student who's doing her dissertation on an advocacy training for South Asian American families, and we talk about this mom all the time and leveraging this mom because she has the network. But really, it's the social capital, right? She didn't have any social capital, and so now she's creating it for other families. It's like pay it forward idea. Finally, resistance capital. So resistance capital means challenging the norms, being empowered to speak up for yourself, being empowered to say something isn't right. And so with resistance capital, this is also a picture of Rogan. When he was transitioning from early intervention to school services, we had an inclusive preschool program. So not the same fight as my parents. Chad and I went and toured the inclusive preschool. At the end of the tour, Chad excused himself to go pick up Rogan to take him to therapy. And the social worker who had been giving us the tour, I thought we were just going to wrap things up, but instead she said, "Oh, why don't you come into my office for a moment?" Which should have been a red flag to me that something was not right. So I go, okay. Go into her office, and she goes, "Rogan is turning 3 on April 18th. And I go, "Yes." And she goes, "But we are not going to give him services until August." And I said, "I'm sorry?" And she said, "Yeah, we're not going to give him services until August." Now, you should know in our law, we have very few things that are inarguable, but one of them is when you turn 3 on your birthday, you get served by the school. It's clear and fast, right? And he had so many delays that there was no chance he was not going to qualify for services. That was not what this is about. And so I had this light bulb moment go off in her office where I thought, I'm going to have to advocate. Like, okay, here we go. And so I said to her, "Well, my understanding is that at age 3, the school has to serve children with disabilities." And she goes, "Yeah, that's true, but we're not going to serve him." And I said, "Well, I think that at age 3, legally, you have to serve him." And she goes, "No, we're not going to serve him. We're not going to serve him until August." And then I start practicing my strategies where I repeat back what somebody has said so they can understand how wrong they are. And so I said, "Let me see if I'm understanding you. You're saying he turns 3 on April 18th. You know you're supposed to serve him, but you're not serving him until August." And she goes, "Yep, that's what I'm saying." And I go, "Okay." And she goes, "The good news for you is I looked up your insurance status and I saw you have private insurance. So you can pay privately for him to get services until August." And I thought, oh my gosh, this lady looked up my private insurance information. She should have looked up what I do, right? Like, really? Wrong thing to Google, you know? Okay, then I thought, all right, let's shift gears. You can get summer services in the States. You can get services over the summer if you qualify. I said, what about summer services? And she goes, well, the only way to qualify for summer services is through regression and recoupment, which means you regress over a period of time, and it takes you a long time to recoup those skills, and that's how you qualify for summer services. Unlucky for her, I had just published an article about the 8 ways to qualify for summer services. And so I said, actually, I think there are 8 ways to qualify. And I rattled them off. And that's when the tone changed, as you can imagine. And then she did this interesting thing where we were still having a conversation, but I was like looking at you, and she was looking at the ceiling the entire time. And I thought, I'm sure this is deter me from advocating, but I teach, no offense, undergraduates. It does not bother me that you are not looking at me, right? I will keep going. So I was like, well, I think that he needs services, and she's looking up here like, no, I'm not giving him services. And then she switched to this like, that's above my pay grade, I'm not gonna talk to you. And then I go, well, sounds like this is systemic. Who do I need to email in the district to get this resolved? She gave me the special ed director's email address. And then I will admit I did escalate it, and I said, sounds like it might be happening across the state, so I should probably CC the State Board of Education to make sure we're all in the loop on what's going on, right? Which she really didn't like. And so then as I was leaving, I was leaving the building, and she went straight into the principal's office and slammed the door behind her. She was so mad at me. And then I called my husband, and I said, you cannot leave me alone. You know, like, I need someone with me. And he was like, I would have cheered you on. And I go, I don't need anyone to cheer me on. I need somebody to rein me back in, you know? But you know what bothers me? One, she's making assumptions. She's saying things that are illegal, right? Two, this is a kid who needed services. This was not a murky, borderline case. This was a kid who was going to regress if he did not get services, and she was going to deny him those. And three, how many other families did she say that to who didn't have the advocacy skills, who didn't have the resistance capital to push back and say, no, I don't think that's right? How many other families have missed out on services? And so I recognize that everyone in this room, you probably don't treat families that way as educators, right? But somewhere along our journey as families, it's likely we're going to encounter this. And so you want to make sure that they probably don't need resistance capital with you, but they need to have it for moments like this that come up completely out of the blue, completely unexpected, that they're going to need to dig and push back so they can get the services they need. We did get services after that. She did call me the next day. She left me a voicemail, and she said, oh, Dr. Burke, good news. We're going to give you services, da-da-da-da-da. And she's the only person in the world who I haven't corrected and been like, oh, you can call me Meghan. I'm like, you can call me Dr. Burke, right? I know, that's so mean. Last one, trust. So trust is the culmination of all of these things, right? You have to have all these other dimensions in place before you can get to trust. And often, but not always, trust is earned. You have to work for it. It's not usually something families give away. And so I think the best way to hear from this is to hear directly from a family who's talking about trust and the importance of educators. And she really kind of sums up all of the dimensions we've talked about. This is a family of now a young adult with autism, talking about her experience and what she wants educators to know. Isn't that great? She hit on so many of the things, and I didn't even pay her to say that. Like, it just worked out, just mapped on perfectly. So wrapping up, things that we're working on, things that I think have worked really well for us in terms of building family-school partnerships. I think one of the best kept secrets in the United States are our parent training and information centers, our PTIs. Our PTIs are federally funded centers. They are primarily staffed by parents of kids with disabilities. They are designed to provide assistance to educate and empower families of kids with disabilities. They provide information and referrals so people can call and say, where do I go to get this? I need XYZ. They provide free training online and in person to families. They provide individualized assistance. So for some families who need more than training, they will go over your educational documents with you, help you write letters to the school, sometimes go to meetings with you at the school so that you can advocate and receive services. And we have at least one in every state in the country. Now, California, given how big it is, has 6. But we're so fortunate to have them, and I think they've been instrumental in making sure that partnerships can happen. We also have community parent resource centers, or CPRCs. CPRCs are a little different than PTIs. They're the same in that they often provide kind of information referral, individualized assistance, trainings, but they are specifically designed for a marginalized or disadvantaged population. So they're really intended for a population that's been historically overlooked, that we know may need more culturally adapted interventions to support them. So the organization I mentioned that serves Korean American families, they are a CPRC. The one that I have here is in California. It's for Chinese families of kids with disabilities. And these have also been really, really important. These are also federally funded. So there's no conflict of interest in terms of them working for the state or for a school district and not feeling like they can educate families about their rights. We've removed that by having their funding sourced at the federal level. In terms of our research, strongly feel that any interventions that we've developed shouldn't just be sitting on a shelf in my office or in like my Google Drive. I think it's really important to share it with other people. So these links are access to some of our materials. If you're interested, we have a training that's early intervention focused. So for families of 0 to 3-year-olds, it's an 8-hour training. It's been really effective in connecting families of young kids who tend to feel very isolated. The one in the middle is a link to our testimonials. So some of the videos I shared are from there, and I think the curriculum is posted on that website as well. That's our 6-hour training focused on legislative and civic engagement. And then our last one is our Spanish curriculum. And so that's all of our materials available in Spanish. And then in terms of adult disability services, we developed a 24-hour advocacy training parents of kids with autism between the ages of 16 to 26 to learn about adult disability services. That's our assist videos. The one in the middle, that was from my great doctoral student, Chung-Hin Lee. She developed a training for siblings of adults with disabilities. I think it's an 8-hour training focused on future planning. That has been amazing to implement and very popular. And then our one on the right is called Task. This is a new one that we're just developing. This one is focused in the schools. So it's educating special education teachers about that transition to adult disability services and giving them short modules to use with families and autistic youth so they can make that transition a lot more seamless. So in terms of next steps and like themes, before I close out, I think it's really important that you take away from this that delivering advocacy interventions or partnership interventions are important, but they really do have to be differentiated, right? So supporting families to develop partnerships on behalf of their own children, having families support other families to develop partnership and provide more individualized assistance, and having families inform systemic change. We've really found that you have to have those 3 steps to make sure that no one truly is left behind and you're bringing everyone to the forefront together. This is a thank you to my funders. Those are some of my students. They had a field day as a lab. They were called Burke's Bunnies. I thought that was pretty cute. They came up with it on their own. I didn't force that. But I thought that was pretty cute. And none of this work would be possible without the students that we have, the staff that we have, and especially the families who participate in all of our training and research. I'm super fortunate to have a great team of people. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Okay, that was a really fantastic presentation. Just saying to Meghan, it's very inspirational, very down to earth, and the impact on families is just groundbreaking and so real. Huh? So if you can just put in your questions, and then we'll get to answer them, and Meghan will give her views on them. Okay. So we'll just watch this.
Okay. Hi, Dr. Burke. My name is Lisa. And my question is, as a special needs parent myself and an educator, how do you advocate to move a system which feels immovable? Of course, I think most of the educators here feel that an inclusive education system would be the ideal. But then the reality is that, it is very difficult to support a child with special needs in the mainstream school system, and they frequently face failing out of that system if they don't swap. So actually, in our mainstream schools, there are a lot of children whose parents advocate for them to enter a mainstream school, who then face failure, and then they try to transfer their child out in maybe grade 3, grade 4. Like many educators have been advocating, have been saying, we can't support an inclusive teaching environment when we have 40 students in a class. And they have been advocating for years to reduce the class size, but that's not a policy that's going to change. So, there are many other. So because I saw that a lot of your advocacy is about knowing your rights and knowing the legislation. What happens when the legislation isn't there? Yeah. To give an example, something that frustrates a lot of special needs parents in Singapore is that children with special needs are not are mostly not covered by private insurance. Yeah, so like the legislation's not there for that. So I just wondered your thoughts on this. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for your question and for your dual role as an educator and a parent. It's a toughie. I do think, we've only had special education in the law since the 70s. It's not that long. So looking at what parents did in other countries prior to having legislation and following their playbook has been really effective, right? Like, what did we do to be able to get to the point where we were? And I think what we've found in talking to families about legislators, families really don't want to go and talk to policymakers. They really don't want to do it. And they always seem concerned that the policymaker is going to dismiss them, or the policymaker is going to ask them a question they don't know the answer to. And the thing is that, and I know there are some policymakers in the room, most policymakers don't have children with disabilities, and they're not part of our world. And so usually it's the parent who's the expert in the room. It's not the policymaker, right? And so, it is critical. I know it stinks that the onus is on parents, usually on families, to push the field forward, but it truly feels like it's the only thing that ever has pushed our field forward. And so it's on us to go and raise awareness outside of our community to say we need these things. Look at other countries, they have these things. How did they do it? In the States, it's a lot of lawsuits, but other places I think have done it differently, right? And I think the other thing of this, because I always feel bad putting more on families, but it can also feel very empowering to go to a policymaker or a legislator and share your story. There's actually a lot of benefit, I think, sometimes in going and sharing things out there, because that is how things change. It may seem unmovable, but I think everything is movable depending on the people. We, when I was in Illinois, we shut down, during COVID. This is an example. And early intervention shut down. Early intervention is usually provided in the family home. And so we switched to doing it over Zoom or telehealth or whatever. And then we opened back up to in-person. And then because of the COVID levels, went back down to telehealth only. And I got a call from the State Department being like, we're going to go back to in-person. And I go, oh, okay, well, that's interesting, because the regulation that had been out there being like, you can't go back to in-person until this COVID reached this level. And the state director, who was real mad about the change, did not want to go back to in-person. She goes, well, there's this group of about 5 rural parents of kids with Down syndrome who called their legislator multiple times, repeatedly, to the point where those legislators then called the state and said, you got to open back up. And it's literally because of these 5 parents that the entire 20,000 children served by that system opened right back up, right? I mean, I know it's not fair, but I do think it's the only thing that's ever made a difference in pushing the field forward.
Okay, let's go to our next question here.
Okay. Oh, you have them?
Yes,
Okay.
thanks to Carol and his team in Delia. Okay, so the other question here we have is, how can we support family advocacy in a country that does not have legislative rights for students with disabilities?
I mean, I think you can't, there are different types of advocacy. I tend to focus on educating family on their rights. But other types of advocacy include intuitive advocacy, right? When parents have a gut feeling that something isn't working, encouraging them, empowering them to speak up for themselves and say, I think this isn't working, right? There's also disability expert, so encouraging families to know everything there is about their child's disability and to use that to inform change can be another way to impact advocacy. I'm not saying it's easy, because I don't think it is without a national policy, but I do think there are other forms of advocacy that are a little less reliant on the law.
Another question here is, what is your view on parents who are resistant on sending children for assessment who are suspected of having special needs, even if they have been flagged out by teachers?
This is such a good question. We have a project that's for families of 3 to 5-year-olds with autism from low-resource communities, providing them with service navigation with navigators. And one of the criteria is you have to have an autism diagnosis because you cannot be eligible for services unless you have the diagnosis. And I bend the rules a lot, but I can't bend that one. And I cannot tell you, I probably got 12 emails from families I do not know at all saying, my child is 4, I know he has autism, we meet all of your other criteria, but I haven't gotten the diagnosis yet. Can they be in your study? And I'm floored by this. Like, how can you know your child has autism and not get them the evaluation? Because until you get the evaluation, you can't get any services, right? And so I have to meet with them individually. I think it's partially stigma, partially not wanting to face it in a formal way, partially not knowing that in that particular area, it takes a year from when you get on the waiting list to actually getting an autism diagnosis, right? Not knowing where to start. There are all these other barriers that are not just, wanting to stick your head in the sand, but I think really listening to families about where they're at is really important because there's lots of reasons why somebody wouldn't want this. I also think, sorry, before you go to the next one. So, like I said, I'm from 5 kids. My sister, right below me, her son has a disability. He's really been struggling. She enrolled him in school, finally, public school. And they immediately were like, we need to do an evaluation, right? He was really not doing well. He wasn't staying in the classroom. And she gets the evaluation report, and she just forwards it to me with no information. And it's about a 60-page report, and it must say 100 times that he has autism. 100 times. He has autism, he has autism. I mean, and it's not borderline, it's like he has autism. He is gonna qualify for services. He is scoring really high on these tests. And so I'm like, okay. So she calls me, she goes, can we talk about the report? Great, let's talk about the report. She goes, do you think I should get a second opinion? No, what are you talking about? Absolutely not. He has autism, But I was nicer than that. But there is something about like not wanting to face it and meeting people where they're at. And that goes back to communication. Like you gotta be honest, right? But you also need to be understanding and not judgmental and really walk them through like, no, they really did do the right tests. And he really is exhibiting this behavior and he really does need support. And a second opinion is not gonna change this, right? Whereas if I had that kind of like, what, reaction, it would have closed that conversation. She wouldn't want to talk to me anymore. So really being thoughtful.
Thank you. The next question here is, how would the Sunshine Framework be adapted to repair a fragmented relationship between families and schools?
That's a great question. I think the nice thing about the Sunshine Framework is that it breaks down into those 6 different dimensions. So if you can identify where the breakdown was in one of the dimensions, 2 of the dimensions, all the dimensions, that can help tailor an intervention to really think about how do you repair it, right? Because some things may be going well and other things are not. And if you can identify where that is, that's much better than throwing the kitchen sink at trying to fix a problem. And I hope the framework can help inform that.
Great. Okay, next question is, how can principals better model and nurture inclusive practices across the school?
Oh, that's a good one. I think inclusion, it's a value. You have to repeat that it's a value. You have to go into the classrooms and see your students with and without disabilities, both as students. If you're modeling the behavior you want to see, people will replicate it, right? And so really showing like our students with disabilities are students just like everyone else, that you know their names just like everyone else, that you say hi to them, that they're included in everything just like everyone else. Inclusion isn't just physically placing a child with a disability in a gen ed classroom. Inclusion is providing them with the support and making them feel like they belong in that school.
Sense of belonging is important, right?
It's so important, isn't it?
Yes. Another question is, how to build advocacy and parent supports in a country where many needed support services are unfunded and access takes a long time?
I think we've talked about some of this. It is a tough question. I would hope that you would look into some of our parent advocacy trainings and adapt them for this context. They're not going to fit perfectly, but they can give you a starting point to think about how do you build up a cadre of parent advocates, right? And looking at the parent center model, that's been so helpful to us in moving the field forward and thinking about how do you improve things at a systems level.
And as you're saying, parents getting together and really raising their voices
Yes.
and making themselves heard, that one is really very powerful, isn't it?
It is very powerful. And you know what else? Thinking about what resonates with the general public. Like, you guys were a very good audience. But I've been in other places where people are kind of like looking at their phones or whatever, and then I throw up a picture of Rogan or a video of Rogan, and they're immediately watching, And it's like when you change things for policymakers or people who are not in our community, and you put a face to a name and a person to a name, and you're showing this is about a child, I think it does help change and move the conversation forward.
Yeah, great. Again, in Asia, parents may be more resistant to seeking help. What would be some effective strategies to overcome this to strengthen home-school partnership?
Yeah. I think the stigma is really hard everywhere. I think I'm trying to understand why they're having a problem seeking help is really important, because that's going to look different for different people. But I also think what's been helpful to me is meeting other families of kids with disabilities, so connecting them to other people, that's social capital, but also aspirational capital. Right? Just because you have a disability doesn't mean that you can't go to a university. It doesn't mean that you can't live independently. It doesn't mean that you can't work in a meaningful job, right? Like showing examples of what is possible, I think may help families feel more comfortable asking for help, because it makes it less scary when you see somebody doing the thing that you were worried your child couldn't ever do.
Because in America, you work also with Asian families, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Do
yeah.
you see a similar pattern in terms of their resistance to seeking help, or?
You know what's funny about this? I have this family I've known for a really long time. The mom is Japanese. The husband is African American. They have 2 sons. One has Down syndrome and autism. And I met them, it's going to date me, like 15 years ago when I was running the VAP. And they're the only people, I've ran the VAP with like 600 families. They're the only people I've ever had that attend as a couple, and they would treat it as their date night. I was like, I don't know if that's cute or sad. Their date night once a week to learn about advocacy. And they would stay afterwards and we would talk about advocacy, and I'd be like, don't you want to go to dinner? Anyway, so they went through the VAP. They had a very hard time with the school district, ended up pulling their child out to homeschool him. And I've since moved back to Tennessee. I've been in touch with them for a long time. Their son is now 21. He's about to age out of school services. And he is, I would say, minimally verbal. He's very good at technology. He's bilingual in Japanese and in English. He's things going on cognitively. He cannot participate in any day programs because he elopes. He will run away. And that's an automatic, you can't come to our program, you're a safety risk, flight risk. And so his mom, Mari, she texted me, she's like, oh, I want to come by your office with Jacob, I want to, let's just chit chat, let's get together. Great, social call, I love it. So she came to my office and she sat down, she goes, Meghan, you have 1 year to figure out a program for Jacob. And I was like, oh my gosh. And we have since written several grants, I don't know if they'll be funded, that are really targeted to kids like Jacob, who we have a post-secondary program for students with intellectual disability. So we do have several students on campus who have Down syndrome or autism who are in gen ed classes with college students. Jacob, because of his behaviors, wouldn't be in that program. So we're trying to figure out how do you design an employment program that could pay his employment but also provide job supports. And so I bring that up because She is definitely not timid, this mom, right? But she's made me think completely differently about what I'm doing, what a need in the community is, how to push the field forward. And I think a lot of other families, especially Asian American families in our community, look to her as a guidepost. You know, she is their aspirational capital. Like, if you're doing this for your kid, I can do this for my kid. Meghan can do this for my kid, right?
So good to find role models and parents. Yeah. Okay, this one is an interesting question. Hi, Professor Meghan. Thank you for your wonderful sharing, especially advocating for mums. I was thinking where are the dads in this? I feel it is equally important, so where are the dads?
I also feel like it's equally important. Yes, I agree. I don't know where the dads are. I really don't. I really don't. And we have not fully explored it, but it has come up as a running theme that moms feel like they go to meetings and they're dismissed as the whiny mom, but their husband goes to a meeting and it changes the dynamic, right? And I have thought about this, and I'm being entirely serious when I say I have thought about running a study where we randomize sending in a trained advocate who's gone through 36 hours of training versus a man who goes into the meeting and seeing which one is more effective. Because there is a gender dynamic at play, right? And if we could educate dads and empower them, this might look very different. I have talked to other moms about this, and they will say, well, I know everything. He doesn't know, you know, it's too much, or I don't want to bother him with this. I have one friend, her daughter has cerebral palsy. She's been a stay-at-home mom. She's really raised her daughter, who's very significant support needs. Her husband is a banker. Very nice guy. He has just retired. And so he said to his wife, Susie, what can I take off your plate? You know, get some me time, right? Like, what can I do? And I go, well, that is so nice that Steve said that to you. And Susie goes, I can't give him anything. He won't know how to do it. It'll take me longer to teach him than it will for me to do it myself. He's taken nothing off my plate, right? And I was like, well, that's kind of interesting. And she's specifically talking about financial assistance that her daughter gets. So she's talking about financial pieces, and he's a banker, right? So I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is in his wheelhouse. So I do think there is another dynamic at play where it's, as a mom, either part of your identity or it's hard to give it up. It's hard to relinquish control, right? Like, I think we could talk all day about that.
Okay, this one relates to your own context. How has recent political regime regime change in the USA, example, abolishment of education department affected the process? Is a bit sensitive?
Yeah. Is this being recorded? I got to get back in the country after this.
Don't let Trump hear this.
I mean, it's definitely a difficult time right now. And I think actually nothing matters. Nothing is as important as advocacy right now. We have really mobilized in terms of advocacy. And definitely stressful for families, definitely a hard time. But we have seen some suggested changes that have met with so much parent advocacy and educator advocacy that the suggested changes have not come to fruition yet. And so now more than ever, I think parent advocacy, educator advocacy really matters in making sure we're able to retain the rights that we have.
Okay. Can we provide more information on how to advocate in a non-adversarial manner? What would that look like?
Oh, I don't know who wrote this, but you should email me because I have something, I should copyright it, but I call it the fluffy but meaningful letter. And I'm being totally serious. It comes across as a thank you letter. You know, it's a template that you write to a school district, an administrator, whatever. And it's just like, it starts off, thank you so much for meeting with me on this day. I just want to clarify to make sure I understand what was being said. Here's who contacted me. Here's what we talked about. Here's why you are or are not providing this service. You know, I'm asking for prior written notice, or sometimes if you're asking for a service, we use all the data to justify why the child needs the service. And then at the end, I have this line that says, I Again, so glad we're working together. I really appreciate it. If I misunderstood anything, please let me know within 3 days. Otherwise, I'm going to consider this to be true. And then you sign your name. And I swear, it does come across as non-adversarial, right? It comes across as a thank you. And I mean it as a thank you, too. But I also mean it as a way to document what's going on, right? You CC it to your child's file. It goes into their records. And I found it to be very helpful. And the other part, as a behavior analyst, I do use a lot of specific praise, right? We're not just advocating when something is going wrong. I think it's really important, that 3-to-1 ratio of giving specific praise and giving credit to where it's due. Nobody goes into special education or education to hurt children, right? So acknowledging when things are going well goes a long way, so that when you are advocating, it's actually much more effective.
Very positive.
Thank you.
What does an ideal inclusive preschool look like to you? Imagine infinite resources.
Infinite
Wow.
resources. Wow, that's a great one. I mean, a truly inclusive preschool would be accepting of kids with all different disabilities, right? Where everyone is treated with dignity and respect, where kids who have more significant support needs have aid support, where they're in there with individualized assistance as they need it, where they're involved in the activities, but it's also differentiated for everyone, and definitely less than 40 kids in the room, right? Like, that to me would probably be good.
How do you think we can adopt such training in Singapore with the regulations and benefits the parents and others can benefit, and also pay forward system?
I mean, you're welcome to, like I said, I'm happy to share with you any of our training. Obviously, you know, our rights and things like that are going to look different here, or more lacking here. But like, it's not just the instrumental knowledge, it's also the affective piece of it, of how do you negotiate, how do you resolve conflict, how do you address it, how do you do it in non-adversarial ways. And those skills with adaptations could fit this context and could be helpful as a starting point versus starting from the ground up.
Okay, all right. Let's see. What are your thoughts on gender stereotypes for roles at home in school, homeschool partnerships?
Oh, this is so funny. So, you know, for Rogan, I only give them my husband's phone number. And they're so surprised. They're always so genuinely surprised. And sometimes they'll say to me, like, you know, we don't have your phone number in the system. And I'm like, that's right. We should probably fix that. But then I don't. Because I work further away. He's the one who's closer. So when they call and it's because he needs to get picked up or like there's some emergency, he's the one who would do it. And I'm also like, he needs to know how to do these things, right? It can't all fall on me. He needs to understand how to do these things. So I feel like we're always kind of pushing back on gender roles. I also sometimes, instead of me writing an email to the school to advocate or ask about a service or an assignment, I will write it up and have him send it, right? So it's like both ways, and it trains him about how to do this because it can't all fall on one person. Like, that's where we're going to get burnout.
Very good distribution of support. Okay, is the framework able to address all the barriers? What still remains as a challenge in the state?
Oh, there's still so many challenges. There's still so many challenges. Yeah, I think the framework is evolving, right? I think the framework is definitely evolving, and we're thinking about it. And the more and more I talk to families, I'm constantly learning of new challenges and thinking about how to resolve them. I'm always coming across families with an experience that I haven't heard of before. So it is in a constant state of getting better and getting informed by people's direct experiences.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's see. How do we inculcate the idea of advocacy in young children, whether or not they have family members or siblings with disability?
In young children with disabilities?
I think young children. Yeah, let's take it from there.
This is so important because in some of our research, we've been interviewing students with disabilities who often say they leave it to their parents to advocate.
and they don't know how to advocate. I have one friend. She has a young daughter. She's a very good advocate. She has spina bifida. And my friend called me. She's like, oh, I have a funny McKenna story. And I go, okay, what is it? She's in middle school now. And she goes, McKenna had a math test. She went up to her teacher, her gen ed teacher, and said, you know, my IEP says I get a cheat sheet of all the formulas to use on the math test. And the gen ed teacher had not checked her IEP and said, okay. And so on the math test, she had this cheat sheet. And she got 100 on it because she had a cheat sheet. And so she brought it home. She was real proud of herself. And her mom goes, McKenna, you do not have that as an accommodation, right? But really, the educator should have read it. And so, you know, what does that teach us? The students need to be educated about what's in there, but they also need to be empowered to speak up for themselves, to ask for it, which McKenna has, that empowerment, and you do have to build it from a young age, because as they get older, the onus is really on the student to enact their accommodations. And if the student doesn't feel empowered to self-advocate, it won't happen.
Okay, let's see. I think I'll just read out some comments they have also made for you. Okay. What family support can be given for students with visual impairments or hearing loss as a team?
I think that peer support is really helpful. So introducing families to other families of kids with similar support needs seems to be one of our most effective strategies, supporting the families.
Okay, all right. I think that's about time. But I just want to read a compliment to you, okay?
Oh, okay.
I really admire your work and thank you for advocating on the importance of your work. This is not a question, a compliment.
Oh,
so I think that answered nicely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Burke and Prof. Lim for clarifying our thoughts and deepening our understanding.